Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Tales of the Bizarre Season 1 Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The 17th story begins with a young man named Morita, who arrives at his senior's company for a potential job. His senior, however, seemed very busy and had no time for him, telling him to wait in the basement restaurant. Morita didn't mind and got into the elevator to go down. Inside, he noticed the employees were very strange. They all had synchronized expressions, staring blankly at the descending floor numbers. Morita told himself that if he started working there, he would never become as monotonous as them. Their eagerness to leave for the day saddened him, as he was full of dreams and ambitions. After they all got out on the first floor, Morita pressed the button for the basement level. However, lost in thought, he was surprised when the elevator doors opened to reveal the company's rooftop. Confused, Morita stepped out to admire the view. He wasn't paying attention and tripped on a concrete ledge, nearly falling off the building. Terrified, he thought about how close he had come to death. Just then, a man appeared behind him. He looked scruffy, with a listless gaze and fluffy demeanor, not seeming like a good person. He walked up to Morita and asked if he knew what people think about right before they fall from that height. Morita thought to himself that only a ghost would know. Before he could answer, the man told him they wonder whether it hurts more to land on the concrete or in the garden. It was like a dark joke, but Morita didn't feel like laughing. As lunchtime approached, the man offered to treat Morita to a meal. During lunch, he complained endlessly about how terrible the company was. Since it was their first meeting, Morita didn't know what to say and just listened. After the meal, Morita finally met up with his senior, whose description of the company was the complete opposite of what the strange man had said. He boasted about the company's bright future, the great benefits Morita would receive, and painted a picture of a grand career path. Morita was torn and decided to go home to think it over. But as he took the elevator down, the same bizarre thing happened again. He ended up on the rooftop. Utterly bewildered, he encountered another strange person, a man dressed as a security guard. Morita quickly explained that he was just visiting. The guard nodded and warned him to stay away from the railing, saying it was a dangerous spot and he might accidentally fall. They chatted for a bit, and the guard also had nothing good to say about the company, his expressions souring whenever it was mentioned. However, when Morita asked about the man he had met earlier, the guard's interest piqued. He mocked the man for being unlucky enough to land on the concrete when he fell. On the other hand, he had managed to twist his body in mid-air and land in the garden. Morita was horrified, realizing both men were ghosts. As he thought this, the security guard vanished without traces of his smell. In a daze, Morita felt as if he too was falling from the building. The scene then cuts back to reality, where Morita, who had been squatting by the railing, suddenly stood up. He decided to take the stairs down and also made up his mind not to work at the company. The story ends here. It seems the employees stare at the elevator buttons because they're afraid of ending up on the rooftop. But in another sense, it seems like Morita was actually dead all along. The 18th story begins on a dark and stormy night when a young man named Konishi was on his way to visit his senior. Unfamiliar with the area, he accidentally took a small path through the woods. The path was lined with a small shrine and many statues. He thought he heard footsteps and felt someone was walking towards him along the winding road, but when he turned around, there was nothing there. Then he heard a child calling for her mother. He followed the sound, but again found no one. While he was confused, a woman ran past him from ahead. She seemed to be in a great hurry and didn't respond even when he greeted her. As she ran, she was calling out a girl's name. Watching her disappear, Konishi shook his head and continued on his way. Soon, he arrived at his senior's apartment building. His senior, a man in his 40s, let him in. The senior had recently divorced and had given most of his assets to his ex-wife, which was why he had moved to this remote area. Konishi told him about his strange experiences on the path, mentioning the woman who seemed familiar, as if he'd seen her downstairs at their office before. He also mentioned the eerie path, where he'd heard a child's voice but saw no one. Upon hearing this, the senior's expression changed. He took a large gulp of his drink and told Konishi that a child had died a week ago, just at the bottom of that mountain road. It had been a stormy night just like this one. The child woke up to find her mother gone, so she put on her yellow rain boots, took her yellow umbrella, and went out in the middle of the night to find her. Due to the slippery road and poor visibility, the girl was in a car accident. Konishi was terrified and wondered if his senior was trying to scare him. The senior assured him it was true. Everyone living there knew about it. He added that the child's mother, unable to cope, had taken her own life the next day, not far from where the child had died, by hanging herself from a large tree on the very path Konishi had taken. Konishi grew more frightened, realizing he must have encountered ghosts. Just then, he noticed a tube of lipstick in the senior's apartment. The senior suddenly asked him if he knew where the mother had gone that night when she wasn't at home. It turned out she was with a man. It was because of this that she couldn't forgive herself for her child's death and hanged herself. Konishi said he understood, but the senior told him that he didn't. He then confessed that he was that man, and the woman had been in his apartment that night. As he finished speaking, a bolt of lightning flashed, and the power went out. The senior told Konishi not to panic and continued his story. He explained that they had both just gone through divorces and had hit it off after a chance meeting. They had only been together for 2 weeks when the tragedy occurred. At that moment, the phone rang. The senior answered, but there was no one on the line. As soon as he returned, it rang again, but still silence. When it rang a third time, Konishi offered to answer it, but he also heard nothing. After the fourth ring, both men were on edge, filled with a terrible premonition. A moment later, with a chilling soundtrack playing, a yellow umbrella suddenly appeared in the room. The senior was horrified. He then saw the soaking wet mother and child standing there. Terrified, he fainted like a pig. Konishi was scared witless too. But when the senior collapsed, the mother and child vanished, leaving behind only a puddle of water and a strand of hair. The story ends here. To put it bluntly, the woman brought her daughter to see her new father. The 19th story begins with a woman named Misa, who had been suffering from stomach pains and after much anxiety, finally worked up the courage to go to the hospital. She feared she had late-stage cancer, but the doctor informed her it was just a mild ulcer that would heal with a better mindset and some rest. Misa was overjoyed. On her way out, she passed a cafe and, in her good mood, decided to go in for a drink. As she entered, she glanced at a mirror on the wall. At the counter, the owner somehow knew she had just come from the hospital, which was both amazing and strange. Misa didn't think much of it, since the cafe was close to the hospital. Just then, she thought she saw a former colleague she knew. She called out, but the person didn't respond, making her realize she must have been mistaken. The owner gave her an odd look, but Misa ignored it, muttering to herself that her ex-colleague should be abroad now anyway. The next day at work, Misa received news that her former colleague had died the previous day from a heart attack. She felt sad about it, but didn't connect it to the cafe. A few months later, Misa went for a follow-up appointment. Everything was fine. So, after leaving the hospital, she went to the same cafe again. To her surprise, the owner recognized her immediately, even though it had been 3 months. While chatting with him, Misa spotted another familiar face, a distant cousin. But the cousin seemed to ignore her, so Misa figured she was mistaken again. Still, she found it odd that she kept seeing so many lookalikes there. The next day, she got a call from her mother, who told her that her distant cousin had passed away suddenly the day before. Although shocked, Misa still didn't make the connection. Many days passed, and after another checkup, Misa found herself passing the cafe again. Just as she was about to enter, she saw another doppelganger. This time, connecting it to the previous 2 incidents, she immediately went home to contact the person. She learned that they too had died. Finally, Misa took notice. She wondered why people died every time she saw their double at that cafe, and if it was a coincidence. At the hospital, her doctor told her she was almost fully recovered and prescribed 2 more weeks of medication. Before leaving, Misa couldn't resist asking the doctor if it was possible for someone to foresee death. The doctor looked at her seriously and asked how long she'd been feeling this way and if she was under a lot of stress. Misa realized he thought she was mentally ill, so she quickly claimed she was asking for a friend and left awkwardly. On her way back, she went to the cafe again. As before, she looked in the mirror at the entrance. Sitting down, she felt anxious, worried she would see another doppelganger. After waiting for a while without seeing anyone she knew, she breathed a sigh of relief. But then, a new fear crept in. What if she saw someone who looked exactly like her? Would that mean she was going to die? Just then, another voice in her head tried to comfort her, saying there was no one else in the world who looked exactly like her. To distract herself, she picked up a small box and asked the owner what the name of the shop meant. He told her it was French for omen or premonition. He then gave her a strange smile, which left her confused. After paying, she was about to leave when she noticed something was wrong. The mirror that was there before was gone. She instinctively asked the owner where it was. He didn't answer, just kept smiling that eerie smile. His smile made her recall what she'd just thought. If someone who looked just like her appeared here, would she die too? She realized the person she had seen in the mirror upon entering was her own doppelganger. Terrified, Misa fled. She ran so fast that as soon as she was outside, she was hit by a car. Just then, a director yelled "cut," indicating that it was all a movie shoot. After work, the actress playing Misa went to remove her makeup. As she was leaving the restroom, she saw the old actor from the cafe scene. He curiously asked her where she removed her makeup. She casually replied that she did it in the restroom. The old man looked surprised and remarked that there was no mirror in the restroom. Hearing this, the actress's face fell. She went back to check, and sure enough, there was no mirror. As she walked out the door, she saw the old actor's eerie smile again. Horrified, she screamed that she didn't want to die. As she hurried away, she bumped into a worker carrying a mirror. The mirror slipped from his hands and fell, shattering right on top of her. The story ends there. The 20th story begins with a vendor selling crabs coming to the neighborhood. A woman usually ate crab, but only the pre-cooked kind from restaurants. This was the first time she'd have to prepare a live one herself, so she was a bit hesitant. She also had a strange feeling that this particular crab was special. However, under the persuasion of her neighbor, she bought a large one. When she brought it home, her son was thrilled. Even though they lived near the sea, it was rare to see such a large live crab. The boy adored it. The thought that his mother was about to cook it made him incredibly sad. When his father came home, the boy immediately pleaded with him not to eat the crab. He reasoned that if his dad didn't eat it, his mom wouldn't cook it. The man, a seafood lover, was excited to see the live crab. But seeing his son's pitiful expression, his heart softened. To protect his child's innocence, he agreed not to eat it. That same night, the neighbors were enjoying a delicious crab hot pot, savoring every last bit, even sucking the marrow from the claws. In contrast, the woman's family had a plain meal, leaving her husband feeling unsatisfied. After dinner, the boy placed the crab in a basin and promised it that he would return it to the sea the next day. The crab seemed to understand, gently raising a claw. After the boy fell asleep, the man told his wife that humans have always survived by eating other animals, and he felt it was necessary for their son to accept this reality sooner rather than later. The woman could only suggest they wait a bit longer, as the boy was still young. Just then, a burglar broke into the neighbor's house. The neighbor fought with the intruder and was about to overpower him when the burglar grabbed a piece of a crab claw and turned the tables, using it to kill both the husband and wife. The wife's final scream alerted the woman and her husband. Fearing something was wrong, they rushed over. In his haste, the man left a lit cigarette on a newspaper. When they arrived at the neighbor's house, they saw the gruesome scene. The man immediately turned back to call the police, leaving his wife behind. At that moment, the burglar appeared and was about to attack the woman's sexy body. Terrified, she grabbed a baseball bat and swung wildly. When her husband returned after calling the police, he found the burglar foaming at the mouth. A few moments later, and the intruder might have been dead. Meanwhile, back at their home, the cigarette had set the newspaper on fire. The boy was fast asleep, completely unaware. However, the crab seemed to sense the danger. It climbed out of its basin, crawled to the living room, aimed its head at the flames, and sprayed a stream of bubbles, extinguishing the fire. Later, the police arrived. After the woman and her husband gave their statements, they were allowed to go home. Upon entering, the woman smelled a strange odor. Alarmed, they rushed to their son's room and found him sleeping soundly, which brought them immediate relief. But when they returned to the living room, they were stunned to see it filled with bubbles. Although the crab had saved them, they were unaware of its heroic deed and assumed some new, advanced fire prevention system in the house had activated. Nevertheless, to keep his promise to his son, the man prepared to take him and the crab to the sea. Before they left, he decided to quit smoking, seeing as the fire was his fault. On the way, the man joked with his son that the crab might repay him one day. The boy replied that he'd had a strange dream the night before, a dream about the house being filled with colorful bubbles. And that's where the story ends. The 21st story begins with a chubby boy named Kenji who disliked his cram school and would secretly skip it to play games at an arcade. He was quite good, and his skills caught the eye of the arcade's old manager. The manager approached Kenji with a gleam in his eye, suggesting he try a more interesting game. Without much thought, Kenji followed him to the machine he pointed out. The manager explained that the goal was to reach 100,000 points. If he did, a miracle would happen. He mentioned that very few had ever succeeded, but his intuition told him Kenji could do it. But Kenji had barely sat down when his mother found him. She gave him a stern scolding and dragged him home. Back home, his mother made his father lecture him. His father gave Kenji a long talk about how skipping school was wrong. He explained that to survive in society, one needed a good education, which meant getting into a good high school, then a good university, a good company, marrying a good wife, and having good children. His father's tone suggested he had some regrets of his own. Kenji was moved by the speech, but the next day, his feet uncontrollably led him back to the arcade. This time, however, he played without enthusiasm. The old manager noticed his troubles and struck up a conversation, once again bringing up the special game machine. He suggested Kenji try to hit 100,000 points, as the resulting miracle might change his current situation. Kenji thought it made sense and sat down at the machine again. While he played, the manager started venting about his own family problems. He said he had enough pension money to retire and didn't need to work, but his daughter-in-law gave him dirty looks all the time. He complained that she always had a sour face, as if he owed her money, completely ignoring how much he helped ease the family's financial burden. Just as he was complaining, Kenji shouted in excitement. He had reached 100,000 points. The manager rushed over to see. Just then, a miracle occurred. A bright light burst from the machine, and with a flash of red and blue, Kenji and the old manager swapped bodies. Kenji panicked. He didn't want to be an old man. But the manager's next words changed his mind. He explained that if Kenji scored 100,000 points again, they could switch back. He proposed that for now, they could use this as an opportunity to have some fun and then return to switch back. Kenji thought about the classmates who bullied him and his strict mother, and he agreed. After leaving the arcade, he first went to find his bullies. Using the old man's body, he taught them a harsh lesson. Then he found his mother while she was shopping and gave her a piece of his mind. Satisfied, Kenji returned to the arcade, scored 100,000 points again, and switched back with the manager. On his way home, however, Kenji noticed bloodstains on his clothes. He didn't think much of it at the time, but when he got home, a news report caught his attention. A woman in a nearby apartment complex had been fatally stabbed by a young intruder. Her husband was devastated, and her father-in-law was also deeply saddened. Kenji was shocked to see that the father-in-law was the arcade manager. The news report continued, describing the suspect as being about 160 centimeters tall, wearing glasses, a white t-shirt, and blue jeans, and said the police were searching for him. After the news ended, Kenji was terrified. He had only used the old man's body to prank some girls, but the manager had used his body to commit a terrible crime. He immediately rushed back to the arcade, but the old manager was gone. A new, young man was now the manager. Without thinking, Kenji grabbed the new manager and dragged him towards the game machine. His plan was simple. Murder was a capital crime, but if he could swap bodies with this new guy, someone else could take the fall for him. However, when they reached the spot where the machine should have been, Kenji was stunned. It was gone. The new manager told him the old manager had sent it back to the factory for maintenance. Kenji froze, standing there in disbelief. The story ends, revealing what was clearly a setup from the very beginning. The old manager likely discovered the miraculous machine, became the manager there, and waited for the right person to come along, who turned out to be Kenji. The 22nd story begins with a woman named Masako, who was born with a plain face and had endured scorn her whole life because of it. Her only hope was to one day save enough money for plastic surgery to change her fate. So, she worked tirelessly. The day she finally had enough money, she disappeared from public view to secretly undergo the procedure. Her mother, unaware, cried every day, while her colleagues were secretly delighted they no longer had to see her plain face. As Masako lay on the operating table, she was anxious. What if the surgery failed and she ended up looking worse? It wasn't unheard of, and then she would truly have nothing left. However, after the surgery, Masako was ecstatic. The doctor was a miracle worker, giving her a completely new face. On her first night out, she eagerly went on a date with a man, and the next morning, she casually dumped him, just as men had done to her in the past. Masako burned everything from her old life, determined to reclaim everything she had lost over the years. She relished the feeling of being the center of attention. But just as she was feeling triumphant, trouble found her. A man confronted her, claiming she had scammed his company and ruined him, and now he was going to take her down with him. Masako was terrified, believing that the man had clearly mistaken her for someone else. She fought back and managed to escape. But soon after, she was accosted by another man who claimed to be her husband and tried to force her onto a bed. She fought him off and escaped again. She thought she would be safe in an elevator, but an old man inside also started yelling at her, saying that fate had allowed him to find this scammer again and he wouldn't let her get away this time. He berated her, calling her a vixen who had cheated him out of his life savings. Masako was completely bewildered, insisting she didn't know him. Just then, the elevator doors opened. A group of people saw the scene and mistakenly thought Masako was bullying the old man. Without time to explain, she fled for her sexy life. She ran until she reached a police station where she reported that people were trying to harm her. But when she saw the wanted poster on the wall, she froze. It was a picture of her new face with the name of a dangerous fugitive underneath. With no time to think, she ran again. Masako was confused, unable to understand how things had turned out this way. She had wanted to change her life and reclaim what was hers, but her new story seemed to be over before it even began. In a desperate attempt to shed her fugitive identity, she decided to change her face back to the original. It was a good idea, but before she could reach the hospital, she was hit and killed by a speeding car. The scene cuts to a news report about the wanted woman's death, which a doctor is watching. The doctor remarks on how unlucky the woman was. She then takes off her surgical mask, revealing that she has the same new face. She was the real scammer, the one who conned people out of their money and their hearts, and in the end stole someone else's face. The 23rd story begins with a handsome man who was so good-looking that he made the nurses cry when he was born. His father named him Handsome, but for all his good looks, he never imagined that one day he would become the center of so much attention. One morning, he woke up a little late. When he came to the breakfast table, he noticed his parents and siblings were all staring at him strangely. At first, he ignored it and started eating, but he soon realized their gazes were unsettling. He asked them why they were staring, but they just kept looking at him intently without answering. The looks unnerved him, so he decided to skip breakfast and head to work. On his way, he was still puzzled. He ran into 3 high school students, and something bizarre happened. To get a better look at his stunning face, they started walking backward just to keep their eyes on him. Not only that, but when he entered the elevator at his office building, everyone inside turned to stare at him. In the office, his colleagues did the same. No matter what they were doing, their eyes were all fixed on his hormone-radiant face and muscles. Completely confused, he asked his section chief if this was some kind of prank. Just then, the chief received a call from the CEO, who specifically asked for him to come upstairs. He rushed up to the CEO's office, where the company president also stared at him with that same eerie intensity. The look made him feel as if he was about to be devoured. Terrified, he fled the office and ran out into the street. But everyone there was staring at him too, just like before. Desperate, he hailed a cab to get away. Once inside, he let out a huge sigh of relief. He told the driver to just drive anywhere. But as the car started moving, he was horrified to see that the driver was also looking at him instead of the road. He shouted at the driver to watch where he was going rather than his handsome face, but the driver didn't move his gaze, though he somehow still managed to navigate turns. It was as if he had memorized the entire city's layout just for this moment, to be able to gaze upon this man's perfect face. But this terrified Handsome, who was afraid of a crash. He screamed at the driver again and again to look at the road. Finally, he had no choice but to kick the driver out and take the wheel himself. As he drove, he muttered to himself, wondering what was wrong with the world. He was just a little handsome, but why did everyone have to stare at him like that? He admitted he had once dreamed of becoming a celebrity and getting attention, but not like this. This was terrifying. Suddenly, the road ahead ended. He was forced to stop. In that brief moment, people nearby were drawn to his captivating face. They swarmed the car, climbing onto the hood and pressing against the windows, all peacefully sharing the view. Handsome was furious at these freeloaders and yelled at them. Finally, he slammed on the gas and sped away. In his panic and at such high speed, he lost control and drove into a ditch. The scene changes to a news reporter at the crash site, reporting on a hit-and-run incident involving a taxi. The report suggests that after the accident, the man, in a moment of despair, went to a bridge to end his handsome life. But ironically, even in this final act, all departments were helpless. In short, Handsome could get up on the ledge, but he couldn't get down. This cursed, all-consuming attention followed him to the very end. The 24th story begins with a clock on the wall running backward. This was the idea of the nursing home's director, symbolizing a return to youth for all its residents. On the day a new resident, Mr. Yoshimura, arrived, he was greeted by a caregiver named Yamaguchi. Yamaguchi enthusiastically gave him a tour and showed him to his room. Everything seemed harmonious until Yamaguchi, while helping Yoshimura unpack, accidentally broke a piece of porcelain. It was Yoshimura's favorite piece. Though not valuable, it held sentimental value. Yamaguchi explained that he was a clumsy person and used to get beaten for it often. He then told Yoshimura that he had learned from the director that Yoshimura was a former math teacher. He recounted how in middle school he had a terrible math teacher who constantly picked on him and had no professional ethics, leaving him with severe psychological trauma. To this day, the mere mention of math gave him a headache. This was during World War II, so the teacher ran his classroom like a military unit. Being a slow learner, Yamaguchi was often singled out for punishment. As he spoke, his anger grew, and he even demonstrated how the teacher used to yell at him. Yoshimura became increasingly nervous and couldn't help but ask which middle school this was. Yamaguchi replied that it was this very place. The nursing home was a converted middle school. Yoshimura was shocked. He had taught here before, but had no memory of this. Yamaguchi, however, seemed unfazed by Yoshimura's reaction and marveled at how funny fate was. He never thought that as an adult he would return to work at the place that held his most painful childhood memories. Yoshimura, on the other hand, never imagined he would retire to the same place he once taught, let alone encounter a student he used to bully. Although Yamaguchi had described the teacher in detail, he hadn't mentioned a name, so Yoshimura, though worried, pretended not to know anything. At dinner, Yoshimura was enjoying his meal when Yamaguchi came over, feigning concern. Suddenly, Yoshimura bit down on a stone that Yamaguchi had placed in his food, breaking a tooth. Yamaguchi immediately apologized, saying how clumsy he was, and then ran off. That night, as Yoshimura was trying to sleep, a needle in his bedding pricked him, making him yelp in pain. He was furious. Yamaguchi had made his bed, so the needle must have been his doing. Enraged, Yoshimura opened his door and shouted, startling Yamaguchi, who once again apologized profusely, saying he just couldn't seem to break his clumsy habits. He urged Yoshimura to go back inside so as not to disturb the other residents. Once inside, Yamaguchi knelt before Yoshimura, begging for forgiveness. Yoshimura, seeing his quick apology and thinking he still had to live there, decided not to make an enemy of him and forgave him. Yamaguchi promised he would never make another mistake. The next day, however, Yamaguchi brought his dog over to greet Yoshimura, knowing full well that he was terrified of dogs. As expected, Yoshimura panicked and ran, tripping and rolling down a hill, breaking a bone. While Yoshimura was unconscious, Yamaguchi told the paramedics that it was all his fault for not watching him closely enough. To make up for it, he said he would skip the group outing to a baseball game and stay behind to take care of Yoshimura. The nurses were delighted and left happily. Yoshimura, however, was filled with dread. The day was just beginning. What followed was a series of torments. Fearing Yamaguchi, Yoshimura tried to crawl away, but Yamaguchi caught him, put him in a wheelchair, and proceeded to wheel him down a flight of stairs, then race him across the lawn and through the woods, giving the old man a taste of speed and fury as branches scraped his face. Finally, after thoroughly torturing him, Yamaguchi took him back to the same hill where he had fallen. This was the ultimate insult. Later, when Yamaguchi wasn't looking, Yoshimura grabbed a rock and knocked him out. A month later, peace returned to the nursing home. It's unknown how Yoshimura explained the incident, but since they were the only two there, his version of the story was accepted. One day, a new caregiver arrived to replace Yamaguchi. As Yoshimura cheerfully went to greet him, he was horrified to discover that the new man was an old classmate of Yamaguchi's. The man explained that they both had a terrible teacher who used to target them. He showed Yoshimura his left hand, saying it could only be raised to a certain height due to the teacher's punishments. It seemed Yoshimura was about to experience speed and fury all over again. The 25th story begins with a single woman of a certain age. Being single for so long, she has inevitably become the subject of gossip among her colleagues and neighbors. But she doesn't care what they say. It's their business. One day, on her way home from grocery shopping, a mischievous boy's soccer ball smashed her carton of eggs. Not only did he not apologize, but he also acted as if she were overreacting. When she confronted him, his equally unpleasant mother came over. After glancing at the broken eggs, she didn't apologize either. Instead, she pulled out some change and tossed it at the woman as if she were a beggar, then walked away. The woman was furious. Both she and the boy's family had the same surname. She lived in apartment 707 and they lived in 701. Back home, while checking her mail, she found a letter addressed to 701 in her mailbox by mistake. Initially, she intended to return it and even walk to their door. But then she overheard the woman inside gossiping about her. Angered, she took the letter back to her apartment. Upon opening it, she discovered it was from a man. The contents were explicit, and it asked the woman to meet him at their usual spot on Friday at 8 p.m. A sly smile spread across her greasy face. She altered the time on the letter to Thursday at 8 p.m. Since it was a computer-printed letter, she guessed the woman wouldn't notice. She then put the altered letter back in the mail. On Thursday evening, she knocked on her neighbor's door, pretending she needed to talk to her. The woman's husband answered, explaining that his wife was working late that night. He asked if she needed anything, but she quickly said it was nothing and left, secretly pleased that her plan had worked. In the following days, she continued to receive letters meant for her neighbor. She would read them, change the meeting times, and then redeliver them. A few times, she even went to the meeting spot to watch her neighbor's frustrated disappointment. Soon, this wasn't enough. She started altering the content of the letters, adding dramatic lines like, "I can't stand this relationship anymore. I'm going crazy. I can't live without you." This campaign drove her neighbor into a state of depression, torn between her family and her affair, which was exactly what the woman wanted. To push her neighbor into making a decision faster, she decided she needed to do something more drastic. However, before she could act, she came home one day to find police cars outside her building. She learned from neighbors that the neighbor's husband had found out about the affair. They had a violent argument, and in the heat of the moment, the wife had killed him. The woman was horrified and regretted her prank. She had only meant to mess with her, not cause a death. That same evening, the police came to question her. They asked if she knew that her neighbor in 701 had been receiving threatening letters, demanding $3 million to keep the affair a secret from her husband. The woman was stunned. This was the work of someone else entirely. She told the police she knew nothing and hadn't seen anyone suspicious. The police left. As soon as they were gone, she rushed home and burned all the letters. For a few days, life was quiet. But then she started receiving misdelivered letters again. At first, she thought it was another mistake, but then she realized they were addressed to her. Curious, she opened one. Inside were 2 blank sheets of paper. She didn't understand. This continued for several days. Every day, she received the same empty letter. It unnerved her so much that she decided to move out immediately. After she left, the other women in the building were thrilled. They had always disliked the woman in 701 and the woman in 707. Now, one was in prison and the other was gone. They celebrated how well the letter-writing trick had worked, wondering aloud who had come up with the $3 million idea, each suspecting the others. Meanwhile, the woman moved to a new home. But ironically, the strange empty letters continued to arrive. The story ends there with the implication that the $3 million demand likely came from the neighbor's lover, a man who was probably after her money all along, and when his plan was ruined, turned his attention to the woman, the original meddler. The 26th story begins during a summer vacation when a young girl named Hannah went to visit her grandfather in the countryside. On her way, she witnessed a terrifying sight, a bizarre procession of creatures that looked like a mix of humans and foxes. They were beating gongs and drums, carrying banners, and holding a coffin as they walked towards her. Hannah screamed in her chicken voice, covered her waxy ears, and shut her peeping eyes. The procession passed by her without stopping. After the sound of the drums faded, she cautiously looked up, only to see a small child holding a banner still standing in front of her. The child uttered 2 words, "Enter the pond," and then vanished. Hannah ran frantically to her grandfather's house. She told her grandfather about the strange encounter. He curiously asked if she had seen a ghost. She replied it was something like that and asked him what "enter the pond" meant. Upon hearing these words, her grandfather became visibly agitated. That night, he seemed to be having a nightmare, muttering strange things and apologies. The next day, when Hannah picked some flowers to visit her grandmother's grave, she found her grandfather already there talking to the grave. He was saying that he probably couldn't make it and wouldn't be able to go to the pond. Hannah called out to him, startling him. He seemed angry at her sudden appearance, and when she asked again about the pond, he scolded her instead of answering. Hurt by his reaction, Hannah ran off down the path. After running for some time, she found herself in a misty area where there seemed to be a pond. Before she could investigate further, her grandfather appeared. Seeing her there, he became furious and ordered her to go home, saying she didn't belong there. Hannah went to the bus station but couldn't bring herself to leave. She knew her grandfather wasn't usually like this. He adored her. His behavior had changed ever since she mentioned entering the pond. She felt there must be a reason, so she went back. Meanwhile, her grandfather was desperately searching for a specific flower in the field. When a bell-like sound, like a death knell, began to ring, he covered his ears and pleaded for more time. That night, when Hannah returned to her grandfather's house, she saw the same eerie procession outside, but they vanished as she approached. Inside, she found her grandfather, who looked surprised, happy, and a little worried to see her. He told her his time was up and he had to go, but he couldn't get into the pond she had mentioned. He explained that everyone in the village goes to that pond after they die, and their deceased loved ones come to guide them. However, people who have done bad things cannot enter unless they find a Bodhi grass. This special grass grows in a large field, and one of them will have a flower that looks exactly like one's own face. It turned out that her grandfather had been a soldier in his youth and had done many terrible things. As such, he could only enter the pond if he found the human-faced grass that resembled him. That was why he had been searching so desperately. With his time running out, he was in a panic. Hearing this, Hana immediately declared she would help him find it and ran out of the house. She searched from night until morning but found nothing. The thought that her grandfather wouldn't be able to reunite with her grandmother filled her with sadness. Just then, her grandfather's spirit left his body and appeared beside her. Seeing her cry, he comforted her, saying it was his own obsession that caused this trouble. He told her he now understood that having a granddaughter who cared for him so much was more than he deserved, and he only wished for her to grow up happy. At that moment, the bell rang again, and Hana saw her grandmother appear with all the other villagers. They had come for her grandfather. Her grandmother told him that he had already found his human-faced flower. It was Hana, a caring, loving granddaughter who looked just like him. Understanding dawned on her grandfather's face. He said his goodbyes to Hana and joined his wife, entering the pond with the others. The 27th story begins with a low-level office worker who has spent years saving up for a large house, foregoing relationships in the process. Now that he finally has the house, he's starting to think about finding a partner. The date is September 17, 1990. He takes his usual train to work, but upon arriving, something feels off. When he tries to chat with his work buddy, their inside jokes don't land. He looks at a calendar and is shocked to see the date is September 17, 1991. He assumes it's a prank, but every newspaper in the office confirms the year is 1991. He begins to worry that he's sick and has lost an entire year of his memory. While he's confused, a woman sneaks up behind him, covers his eyes, and asks him to guess who she is. He turns around and guesses the wrong name. She introduces herself as the woman he had spoken to on the phone the previous night. The man thinks this isn't so bad. He was just wishing for a girlfriend and now one has appeared. According to his friend, he met the woman, a real estate agent, when he bought his house, much to his friend's envy. When he gets home that night, he finds his apartment has been redecorated. Thankfully, when he wakes up the next morning, only one day has passed. He takes the train to work as usual and dozes off. When he arrives at his building, he cheerfully greets the woman, only to receive a hard slap. She accuses him of two-timing her and says she can't forgive him. Back at his desk, he receives a wedding invitation from his friend, who was single just yesterday. He checks the calendar, September 18, 1992. Another year has passed. A day in his life is a year in reality. He can't figure out what's causing it, wondering if it is because of the train. The next day, he inspects the train but finds nothing unusual. He holds a newspaper and stares intently at the date, trying to catch the moment of transition, but he dozes off again. As he sleeps, the train seems to be imbued with a mystical power, traveling through time. When he opens his eyes, it's September 19, 1993. This pattern continues for the next several days, and he soon finds himself in 1997. As he's pondering this at his desk, someone interrupts him, asking the department head what's wrong, as the man is sitting in his chair. He realizes he's been promoted. The joy of the promotion temporarily overshadows his time-traveling worries. That evening, he comes home to find a beautiful woman there, realizing he's married. When she asks if he wants dinner or a bath first, he blurts out that he would rather go to bed with her first. In just a few days, he has experienced two of life's greatest joys. The train is no longer a problem, it's a blessing. One day, after an impromptu meeting at work, he gets another promotion. He's told he will become the section chief on the 1st of next month. Excited to share the news with his wife of 2 days, he rushes home, only to discover he has a 1-year-old child. It's happening too fast. The next day at the train station, he sees a high-speed bullet train and has a bold idea. If the regular train makes time pass quickly, what would happen if he slept on a faster one? He decides to try it. After a nap on the bullet train, he wakes up to find he has grown a beard and looks more mature. The date is now September 25th, 2019. He's stunned. When he arrives at the office, he has no idea where his desk is. Just then, a man approaches him deferentially, informing him of an upcoming executive meeting. He dimly realizes he has become the general manager. The leather sofa in his new office is certainly more comfortable than his old chair. He learns from the subordinate that he is about to be appointed as the company president. He is ecstatic. The surprises just keep coming. On September 26th, he boards the train as usual, ready for a nap that will make him president upon waking. Unfortunately, a young couple's hormone chatter keeps him awake, preventing the time jump. He despises this slow-paced life, so he has his secretary buy him some sleeping pills. He plans to take them on the train to ensure a long, deep sleep. He imagines that when he wakes up, he'll be on the board of directors, or maybe even a grandfather. Filled with joy, he closes his eyes. This time, he sleeps too soundly. When the train reaches its final stop, he doesn't wake up. The conductor tries to rouse him only to discover that he has passed away. While his life of instant gratification was thrilling, it was ultimately cut short. The story serves as a reminder that life is about the journey, the good and the bad, the joy and the sorrow. It is this process that allows us to grow, and in the end, the destination isn't what truly matters. The 28th story begins with a payday when a woman went straight to the bank after work to check her account. She couldn't believe her eyes. The finance department had deposited $100 million. At first, she thought she was seeing things, so she printed a receipt. It was real. This windfall brought her not joy, but anxiety. She went home feeling like a thief and spent a sleepless night worrying. The next day, she went back to the bank to confirm the amount was still there. Seeing the $100 million again, she couldn't focus at work. She wondered what she should do and if she should tell the finance department about their mistake. Just then, her boss mercilessly berated her. In that moment, her guilt vanished. She decided it was the company's mistake, and she had no obligation to report it. They deserved a lesson. From then on, she started withdrawing large sums of money and spending lavishly. Her behavior, however, attracted unwanted attention. One day, the bank manager called her in. The woman's heart sank, thinking she had been caught. But the manager only wanted to ask if she was interested in wealth management. She said she'd think about it and left with a small gift from the bank. On her way out, a man in a hurry bumped into her, knocking the gift from her hands. He apologized, saying he was in too much of a rush to buy her a new one, so he gave her a banknote and his business card and ran off. She glanced at the card. He was a company president. A few days later, she happened to run into him outside her office building. He apologized again for his haste and offered to treat her to a meal. The woman didn't question how he knew where she worked. She found him handsome and agreed. One thing led to another, and they started dating. Soon, the man proposed to her. He said that although they had known each other for a short time, he was deeply in love with her and had to marry her. He added that he wasn't getting any younger and was eager to settle down. The woman was deeply moved and was about to accept when he received a phone call. After the call, his mood soured. She asked him what was wrong. He was hesitant, but she pressed him, saying that since they were getting married, they shouldn't have secrets. He finally confessed that his company was in serious financial trouble and he couldn't get a loan. The woman was relieved. With her newfound wealth, money problems were no problem at all. The next day, she gave him the remaining $85 million from her account. No questions asked, no IOU. The man accepted it with gratitude, promising to pay her back and treat her well forever. The woman was overjoyed, believing she had finally found the right person. The next day, the man disappeared. When she went to his office, she was told no such person worked there. The woman was stunned. It finally dawned on her that she had been scammed. Her heart ached for the $85 million, but she tried to console herself by thinking it was ill-gotten gains anyway. She resigned herself to being poor. The matter was forgotten. Soon, it was payday again. As usual, she went to check her salary after work, but was puzzled to find that no money had been deposited. Furious, she went to the finance department to ask about her missing wages. The finance officer explained that they had already paid her last month. Because they were a trading company, they had taken advantage of a high US dollar exchange rate to pay out all employees' salaries up to retirement, along with their pensions in one lump sum. Hearing this, the woman was dumbfounded again. That explained the huge deposit and why the company never noticed a mistake. Her legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. The story ends there. The 29th story begins with a strange old man who waited by his door for the mailman at the same time every day. The mailman advised him that it wasn't right to write letters using his grandson's name, but the old man asked him to keep it a secret. The truth was, the old man had seen a photo in a newspaper of a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to his first love. Unable to resist, he started writing to her, but he used his grandson's name to avoid seeming like a creepy old man. The memory of his first love was a sweet one. In his youth, his own cowardice had caused him to let her go. He later heard she had gotten married and moved abroad, and then that she had died during a period of chaos there. This had weighed on his heart for years. He often wondered if he had been braver, they might have been together, and perhaps she wouldn't have met such an early, tragic end. Back in the present, writing to the girl had changed the old man. He was acting younger and more energetic. This change was noticed by his grandson and daughter-in-law. The grandson complained that his grandfather's attempts to act young were cringeworthy and wondered if he might have dementia. His daughter-in-law wasn't sure what to think and suggested they just keep an eye on him. One day, the old man received a letter from the girl. She wrote that she would be in Tokyo on Sunday and wanted to meet him. He was shocked. How could he meet her? No matter how young he tried to act, his age was undeniable. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. He believed it was really impossible for him to see this girl who looked so much like his first love one last time. Lost in thought, he choked on his food and died to meet Jesus. When he arrived in the afterlife, he met a being, perhaps an angel or a reaper, who apologized profusely. He explained that he had made a mistake. The old man was actually supposed to die that evening, but he had gotten the time wrong due to a heavy workload. He mentioned this was his second mistake of the day, as he had also accidentally brought an old woman over before her time and had to send her back. He offered to send the old man back as well. The old man was overjoyed. Forgetting about the other old woman, he focused on his chance to return. He asked if he could be sent back looking like his grandson. If so, he would die with no regret. The being found it strange that both the old man and the old woman had made similar requests, one to look like her granddaughter, the other like his grandson. Despite his confusion, he granted the old man's wish. When the old man returned to the living world, he found he was in his grandson's body. He was ecstatic and happily went to meet the girl. At the meeting spot, he spotted her immediately in the crowd. She truly looked just like his first love. She too saw him right away. They spent the day together like any young couple, shopping and eating. But as time passed, the moment of parting drew near. The old man finally summoned the courage to say to her what he had always wanted to say to his first love. He told her that he liked her and wanted to sleep with her. The girl replied that she liked him too and asked if they would see each other again, but not in bed. The old man hesitated and said it probably wasn't possible, as this was his last day. He told her it was their fate. After apologizing, he ran off like riding a Tesla bike, feeling he had no regrets. He returned home, sat in his chair, and a short while later, he passed away for everyone's good. The next day, in the young girl's home, she smiled at her reflection in the mirror, looking very happy. Just then, the door opened, and a young girl came in, calling her grandma and saying she was home. The old woman in the young body didn't answer. She closed her eyes, rapidly aged, and then stopped breathing. In her hand was an old photograph of the old man in his youth. It turned out she was the old woman the Reaper had mentioned, his first love. She hadn't died all those years ago and had remembered him just as he had remembered her. Their youthful shyness had led to a lifetime of regret. If only they had been braver back then, things might have been different. But that is life and that is fate. While a life with regrets may be a complete one, if you could truly go back, what regrets would you want to set right? This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.